One of the first things almost everybody says after unintentional harm is this: my story is different. Not in a proud way, but in a lonely way. Different because the circumstances were unusual. Different because no one else they know has ever experienced anything like it. Different because it doesn't seem to fit into any category that makes sense. And that belief that this is uniquely mine can become incredibly isolating. If you've ever thought no one could possibly understand this, you're not strange, you're not weak, you're not imagining things. You're responding to a silence that exists all around you. Unintentional harm is far more common than we ever talk about, and yet it's almost entirely hidden. It doesn't come up at dinner tables. It doesn't get discussed at work. It is not something people casually share, not because it's rare, but because it's unbearable. People who have caused unintentional harm often live with the sense that if others really knew, they'd be judged, rejected, or reduced to that one moment forever. So they stay quiet, and that quiet can last for decades. There are people who have lived most of their adult lives carrying something like this alone. People who raised families, built careers, contributed to their communities, all while holding a memory they never learned how to process. They didn't ignore it because they didn't care. They ignored it because they didn't know what else to do. Many learned early on that the safest option was to bury it, was to push it down, was to get on with life, be grateful that it wasn't much worse. And for a while, that can work. You can stay busy. You can distract yourself. You can convince yourself that enough time has passed. But buried things don't disappear. They wait. They show up later as anxiety, depression, anger, numbness, or a persistent sense that something is unfinished. They show up when life slows down, when roles change, when distractions fall away. Time alone does not heal what has never been named. One of the most painful myths about unintentional harm is that it's rare. It isn't. Every year, tens of thousands of people unintentionally cause the death of another person. Car accidents, medical errors, accidents at home or at work, firearms, drownings, falls, one every 18 minutes. Illnesses transmitted unknowingly. That number doesn't even include some serious injuries which we can't calculate. And yet, because there is no central place where these stories are told, because there is no shared language for this experience, almost everybody assumes that they are alone. They assume their pain is an anomaly, but it isn't. You are not part of a tiny, shameful outlier group. You are part of a hidden community, one bound together not by intent, but by consequence. There's a word for this group, and it is the Hyacinth Fellowship. The name comes from that ancient story. Hyacinth, the young man, killed accidentally, no malice, no intention, just a tragic moment that couldn't be undone. According to the story, from the place where his blood touched the ground, a flower grew, a hyacinth, fragrant, beautiful, and alive. That image matters, not because it makes the death acceptable, not because it softens the loss, but because it refuses to believe that harm is the end of the story. It holds together two truths at once. Something terrible happened, and life still insists on growth. For many people who have caused unintentional harm, this image is difficult to accept. It can feel wrong to imagine beauty or meaning growing out of something that caused so much pain. But the image is not about celebration. It's about honesty. It's about acknowledging that burying the past does not heal it, and that facing it with care, truth, and with support is often the only way forward. So many people who have caused unintentional harm try to give their experience a burial without a funeral. They dig a hole as quickly as possible. They drop the memory in. They cover it up again as fast as possible. They never mark the place. No words, no witnesses, no acknowledgement of what was lost or what was changed. And without a funeral, mourning has nowhere to go. A good funeral, by contrast, does not erase pain. It does not excuse harm. It does not tidy things up. A good funeral tells the truth. It allows grief to be expressed. It acknowledges responsibility where it exists. It honors what was lost. And it recognizes that something remains. A good funeral puts a marker in the ground, not so you can live there forever, but so you don't have to pretend that nothing happened. For people who've caused unintentional harm, this kind of truth-telling, it's often terrifying. What if naming it makes things worse? What if talking about it brings judgment? What if facing it opens a door you can't close? Those fears make sense. But the cost of silence, it's high. When an experience like this is kept secret, it tends to grow larger in the imagination. Shame feeds on isolation. Guilt becomes distorted. Responsibility turns into self-annihilation. Secrecy can convince you that you are uniquely broken, uniquely dangerous, uniquely undeserving of care. But secrecy is not healing, it's containment. And containment eventually leaks. Another important distinction in this chapter is what it means to be a part of the Hyacinth Fellowship. Membership is not about legal guilt. It's not about blame assigned to others. It's not about whether you were charged or convicted. It's about how you understand your role. If you were involved in an incident where somebody was seriously injured or killed, if you see yourself as responsible in some meaningful way, and if you did not intend harm, you belong here. That includes people who were blameless in the eyes of the law. It includes people who made mistakes. It includes people who were negligent, who were reckless. It does not flatten those differences, but it does recognize a shared burden, because regardless of legal outcomes, the internal experience can be devastating. Many people struggle not only with trauma, but with judgment from others. Communities often want somebody to blame, and when facts are incomplete or emotions are high, assumptions are made. People may believe you intended harm. They may believe you should have known better. They may reduce your entire life to one event. That judgment can wound deeply. And when resources are scarce, when there are few places to turn, that wound can fester. One of the reasons this work exists is because unintentional harm has been largely ignored as a category of trauma. There are books, studies, and support systems of many kinds of suffering, but very little to none for this one. That absence sends a message. You're on your own. But you're not. What you are experiencing is not evidence of personal failure. It is a human response to an overwhelming event that collided with your values, your identity, and your sense of safety. The fact that you are still thinking about it years later does not mean you're stuck. It means something important has not yet been given the care it deserves. Healing does not require forgetting. Healing requires truth, support, and compassion. It requires acknowledging that while you cannot change what happened, you can change how you carry it. It requires letting others bear witness so you don't have to hold everything alone. And it requires the courage to believe that your life is not over, even if it has been permanently altered. The hyacinth does not erase the blood from the ground. It grows from it. That's not redemption through denial. It's transformation through truth. If you've spent years burying this experience, perhaps the invitation now is not to dig it up violently, but to tend to it carefully, to give it words, to give it witnesses, to give it a place in your story that is honest, but not all-consuming. In the next video, we'll talk about what happens in the immediate aftermath of unintentional harm, about shock, trauma, the ways the mind and the body respond when something unbearable occurs. For now, though, let this be enough. Your story is not as unique as your shame has told you. You are not alone in this. And facing the truth gently and with support is not a betrayal of anyone. It's an act of courage. And we'll keep going together.